But joining us in our studios, we're going to come back with her, but I want to start the a conversation now. Charla Stevens, McLane, Middleton Law Firm, one of our great sponsors. Good morning, Charla. How are you?
Good morning, Jack. I'm great.
Now, you have a great diverse practice of employment law. You know, you work with independent schools, labor and employment law, even healthcare. But today you're nice enough to focus on one thing that everyone can relate to. Speaking of the presidential election and politics, it's a very contentious year. We've heard just about everything. And as Bob Ney said, there's more to come.
Right.
So what are the kind of the mores or the smart etiquette when it comes to social media? A lot of people don't know. If I'm an employee, for example, and I want to write something about Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or John Kasich or the president or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, have I forgotten anyone? Or a state race here, the governor or a senator, and I post something that's, borderline out there, a little bit animated, maybe a swear or two, not a threat, but just kind of like over the line a little bit that you might not even say, in a kitchen setting. As an employee, does the employer have any say on what you put on Facebook or an email or things like that?
Sometimes they do, and a lot depends on how it impacts the workplace. As far as employer policies, it has to do with what are legitimate business interests you're trying to protect. And one example that I've used is somebody has a bumper sticker on their car, and they use their car for work. They travel to customer locations. Can an employer say, take the bumper sticker off because as a business, we want to appear neutral and not in favor of any candidate? And I would say yes, you can ask the employee to do that.
Can you tell the employee as a condition of employment to take it off?
Yes, I think you can. What you always want to have as an employer are good policies that are neutral. You want to make sure that you're even-handedly implementing them, that you're not favoring one candidate over another. You're not, choosing one political party over another. If you have those types of policies, then I think it's totally appropriate to have a policy that limits something that an employee might say or do that could potentially damage the business.
Now, you're the lawyer, but I've hung around enough lawyers to maybe think like one. Part of it, too, and being a former manager in my TV days, is how you communicate your policy. I mean, if your employees know what it is ahead of time,
right,
and it makes sense and most people buy into it, because I think what an employer could say is, look, I know you don't like her or him. I agree with you, but that's not important. Not all of our customers are going to agree with you. We're a business. You can speak on your own time outside the workplace, but when you do this kind of thing with a company vehicle, whatever, please don't.
Right.
If you handle it, smartly, right?
I think that's absolutely right. And in terms of things like personal social media, like Facebook, it's a little more difficult for a company to intrude in that. But you want to make sure.
But can they? If someone goes on a rant every night, they're railing against hypothetically a state politician or a presidential candidate. Can the employer after a while talk to the employee about it?
I think so. And I think one thing the employer can definitely do is say, don't identify yourself as an employee of our business when you are engaging in this type of discourse, because that could be potentially a bad impact on us. On something like LinkedIn, maybe employers would definitely want to, if they're used for professional purposes, say don't identify yourself with any party affiliation or any particular cause that might be controversial. On personal social media,
Wow.
Don't identify yourself as an employee of the business. Keep personal and business separate.
And you almost have to become a social media expert, right? Probably more than me. All right, we'll be back. Charla Stevens, McLane, Middleton. A little bit later on, we're going to introduce you to a Penman Pride segment, our friends at Southern New Hampshire University, and Granite Get Up and Go. But we'll be right back. More on this kind of stuff with social media. Fascinating right after this. Welcome back to New Hampshire Today. Charla Stevens with McLane Middleton Law Firm. And David, if you have a comment or question, because he's Mr. Online guy, he knows everything. Weigh in. But Charla, you were saying something during the break, and David and I have talked a lot about this on the show, or I have. We have. And I didn't bring up last night, for example, David, with Bob Ney at a Trump event in California. There were arrests. How many? Like a couple, 20? Wasn't there a lot of turmoil or something? I mean, we'll get the number. But what I'm talking about is a lot of emotion around this election season, right?
More than ever
and that
before.
that leads to name calling, right?
Yeah.
And you see where I'm going with this. So on social media, Religious stuff has been talked about in this election, ethnicity, income classes. Very, hey, you know what? For historians out there, we can go back to Jefferson and Adams. Back around 18, there was a pretty contentious election there with a lot of name calling.
Sure.
But there wasn't social media back then.
And not as many laws that protect certain individuals. I mean, one of the things that employers need to be really careful about is in this particular election, we see a lot of insulting of, religious groups, of, age groups, gender discussion, certainly ethnicity, racial discussion. I mean, you start talking about that in the workplace, and that gets divisive, and maybe there's a cause of action there against the employer for allowing a hostile work environment. So it's touchy stuff.
It is, and really it's sort of cutting-edge stuff, right? Not a lot of precedence here.
No, not in terms of tying it into political speech or the freedom to express your opinion, but in the workplace, it's not the same as being out in the public. I mean, in the workplace, they can control your speech to a certain degree. And
Charla, Stevens, one thing, and by the way, we need to get back on. You're great at this stuff. This is good. This is good topic area. Let's just go back to the presidential election for a moment. You can say what you want about Trump, but speaking of online stuff, it was his wife that a certain group was putting up pictures of her from her modeling career half naked.
Right.
I don't know if he enjoyed seeing that every night or she did. I mean, in other words, there's no more rules.
No, there's a whole new world.
They've commented on each other's hair, weight, name calling like 8th grade. I'm just saying.
Facial features.
Insulting
each other.
Size of fingers that led to other in a presidential debate.
Right.
I mean, we haven't seen and by the way, everyone wants to lay it on Trump, but Rubio took part.
Right.
Cruz takes part.
Tit for tat.
Yeah, and we've even seen lately more of a dust up with Hillary and Bernie.
Yeah.
We haven't seen this before, and then it goes all right afterwards, right online.
And some of the things that have been said in the political campaign are things that would get you in trouble if you were saying them at work, if somebody complained about it.
Oh. Well, that's the funny thing, because as a former manager, I used to be very cognizant, and you need to be cognizant doing what I do here on this, and I want to be. It's just the way I was raised, I think. But in terms of respect, but there are just some things you should not and cannot say in the workplace.
Right. That's right.
A lot of it's common sense, but you're right. Out on that campaign trail, that book has been tossed out.
Exactly. I mean, at work, employers have all kinds of policies prohibiting, discussion of sexual issues, anything about that's going to be insulting to a racial group, a religious group. I mean, that's all prohibited at work because it's potential discrimination against a protected class.
What are some good rules of thumb for both the employee and the employer when it comes to the social media side of things? Both, right. And by the other, we didn't talk about at work.
Right.
On the clock.
Face-to-face
A
communication.
lot of people are on there doing stuff that is not pertinent to the job. You know that happens.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And that's a tough one to police from time to time.
And that's another thing. I mean, where do the lines go? We have to get you back, because this is, we've talked on parents in the show. We've had law enforcement people talking about this drug crisis. They're telling listeners, if you're a parent, you can get into your kid's phone and laptop and into their face at 2 a.m. and say, who are you talking to? I mean, with child predators out there. That's your house that you're probably paying the bill. Now, in the workplace,
right? If
an employer suspects that employee B is spending his or her day doing non-job description stuff just online, posting stuff, do they have a right to go onto their laptop and say, let me see what you're doing from 9 to 1?
Absolutely. Certainly with respect to any device that is company-owned, if you're on the company internet, most employers these days have very tight policies regarding monitoring. They make sure to let employees know that nothing that they do on the company electronic system is private and is subject to monitoring. So if you don't want your employer to see it, don't do it on your work computer.
I've always found that interesting too, because going back to employees and employees' bosses. I had a job prior to this in my past life, if you will, where my job was the hiring of employees, and there were certain questions on applications and certain questions during interviews we could not ask.
Right.
But we could ask for their Facebook page and their Twitter page, which contains most of that information. For instance, one of them is, I believe on applications you cannot ask a age. You cannot ask a specific age. You have to. You can ask if they're 18 or over.
Exactly.
But if you ask for their Facebook page, it's probably going to give you their exact age or their birth date.
Yeah, one of the things that we usually say to clients and I usually represent employers, of course, is be really careful about what you look at, because you might find something out that you don't want to know. Employers, will sometimes Google applicants, and you can find some very interesting information about applicants, whether they've lied on resumes, did they really go to that school, and that's important information to have if you're hiring somebody. But is it important to know that their mother has breast cancer, or that they're pregnant, or what their sexual orientation is? And you may find all of that out by looking at their social media, and then if you don't hire them, potential problem if you have information that you would not have been able to ask had them in front of you in an interview.
Quick hypothetical before we let you go. Charla, Stevens, McLane, Middleton law firm, McLane, Middleton offices in Portsmouth, Manchester, and around. Employee post, hypothetically, on a Facebook page Wednesday night at 7. Hey, feel like going to the beach tomorrow. I'm blowing off tomorrow. To hell with my boss. Going to take the day. I'm going to tell them I have a cold.
Yeah.
If boss hears about it, what happens?
The boss can discipline for that. If the employee calls in and says that they're sick and they're not being truthful.
And they come back with a nice suntan from the beach?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Hey, we'll get you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fun.